Welcome to World Revolution Channel. Today we present a summary analysis of the book Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill.
In Napoleon Hill's book, Outwitting the Devil, you'll find a truly bizarre interview with the devil.
And it reveals the secret to controlling the human mind through fear and just aimless wandering.
So let's listen to this book summary to learn how to overcome your inner demons and achieve true success.
Let's go see what it's like.
You know, this is genuinely one of the most compelling and, I have to say, probably the strangest psychological blueprints ever put to paper.
It really is. And this isn't just another look at Napoleon Hill's philosophy. We're doing a deep dive into a specific manuscript he wrote back in 1938.
Right, this was at the absolute peak of his fame, just after Think and Grow Rich came out, and then this manuscript was immediately suppressed, hidden for decades.
And that backstory is just so critical to understanding what's inside, isn't it? I mean, it didn't actually get published until 2011, long after Hill was gone.
Yeah, and the why is the key. His wife, Annie Lou, was apparently terrified of the fallout.
Terrified. She was worried about backlash from, organized religion. She thought the book's challenge to everything would cost him his job at Presbyterian College.
The irony is just staggering. I mean, the whole book is fundamentally about how this negative entity, the devil, uses the fear of criticism as one of his best tools for control.
And that exact fear is what kept this book, The Devil's Own Confession, from being published for almost 70 years.
It's unbelievable. So our mission today is to finally pull that curtain back, dig into this source material, and really extract the devil's confession.
You're focusing on his two main weapons, right?
Yeah.
The big ones. Fear and the habit of drifting.
And most importantly, we're going to lay out Hill's 7 principles. This is the actual roadmap for you, the listener, to counter this negative energy. It doesn't matter if you see it as a literal devil or, just a force inside your own mind.
Hill's core philosophy is pretty uncompromising. We should lay that out right now.
Yeah.
He basically argues that this entity we call the devil is primarily a psychological force, and it's fueled by human fear.
Exactly. Fear is the tool of a man-made devil. And the only thing that can defeat it is a really profound, self-confident faith.
He gives you this incredible sense of liberation right at the start. Your only limitations are self-imposed.
Which is empowering, but then he hits you with the other side of it. He claims this negative entity controls a staggering 98% of people.
98% is a huge number. These are the people who are just drifting, letting life happen to them instead of taking control.
So if only 2% of people are actually the masters of their fate, then this deep dive has to show us exactly what that 2% is doing differently.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the power Hill eventually used to, interview the devil, we have to go back, way back to the beginning of his mission.
It all starts with this really unprecedented conversation he has with Andrew Carnegie. At the time, Carnegie was one of the wealthiest, most powerful men on the planet.
And this wasn't just like a job interview. It was something bigger. He called it a compact.
Yeah, it was a cultural compact. He charged Hill with this epic task to research and codify the laws of success and failure.
And the timeline was just insane. Carnegie told him it would require at least 20 years of continuous effort.
The scope was immense. He had to analyze 25,000 failures.
25,000.
And distill what made 500 of the most successful people in history tick. I mean, can you imagine taking on that kind of project?
Especially when you hear the financial terms.
There were none, at least not up front. Carnegie promised him zero immediate profit, no recognition. He even warned Hill that this kind of work that's meant to benefit all of civilization, often doesn't get its due for a century or more.
So the only motivation could be the work itself, just pure, sustained persistence.
But the most vital thing Carnegie gave him wasn't the mission, it was a concept. The concept of the other self.
Okay, let's unpack that. What is the other self?
It's that latent, untapped potential inside every single one of us. It's like a dormant genius, this huge reserve of power that we almost never access in our day-to-day lives.
And there's a catch, right? You can't just decide to turn it on.
Exactly. Here's the catch. That other self only shows up under intense pressure. It surfaces during unusual emergencies, great adversity, temporary defeat.
So when everything's comfortable and easy, we just stay on autopilot.
We rely on routine, but when the pressure hits, when you're backed into a corner, you are forced to think your way out of it. And that's when you access faculties you didn't even know you had.
It completely reframes what failure is.
Yeah.
Hill started to realize that most real failures are due to limitations which men set up in their own minds.
Yes, a physical setback, a business that goes under, that's not failure. It's just a signal. It's a signal to rearm yourself with a new plan.
He uses that famous story about R.U. Darby to hammer this home.
Darby quit digging for gold just 3 feet away from the main vein. Physically, he failed. He walked away from a fortune.
But the mental lesson he learned from that failure was so profound.
Yeah. It changed his life. He learned the power of persistence from that one mistake and went on to build a massive insurance empire. Not by digging, but by selling. He converted that error into a philosophical cornerstone.
So the real quitting, the real failure, happens in your mind, not in the real world.
That's it. And what's so fascinating, and what the sources really dig into, is that Hill himself was a perfect example of this. He knew all these principles, but he was still just completely unstable internally. He hadn't accessed his own other self yet.
He was a successful drifter. That's what you're saying. He was making money, but he was constantly drifting, despite all the external success.
Absolutely. You look at his career, and you see a guy who was commercially brilliant, but psychologically just restless. He was an advertising manager at LaSalle Extension University for a year, then just left. He couldn't even say why, just an inner urge.
He walked away from a totally sound business to go serve under President Wilson during World War I.
Then there's the Golden Rule magazine. By any measure, a huge success right out of the gate.
A huge success. It made over $3,000 profit in the first year. In today's money, that's like the buying power of over $200,000. For a new magazine, that's incredible.
And he walked away. He just walked away, saying it was because of petty annoyances.
It doesn't make sense. And then he organized a sales training school that netted him $30,000 in 6 months. I mean, the money was flowing.
But he admitted he was fidgety, he was unhappy. He finally concluded, no amount of money would ever make me happy. He was looking for happiness in all the wrong places, through external things, which is the exact opposite of the definiteness he was trying to teach.
Cool. So he was a walking contradiction. He knew the theory, he could teach the theory, but his own life was just this constant battle with indifference and indecision.
The very things the devil later identifies as the gateway to drifting, that internal friction, it had to reach a breaking point. Something had to happen to force that other self to finally show up.
And that breaking point wasn't some quiet philosophical moment. It was a terrifying real-world emergency that just stripped him of everything.
It took away his comfort, his pride, his initiative. For a long time, Hill felt completely lost in a jungle without a compass, just paralyzed by what he called the worst of all human ailments, indecision.
And the sources, they paint a really shocking, almost visceral picture of what caused it. The Canton Crisis, around 1926.
Yeah, this is serious stuff. Hill was associated with a man named Donald Ring Mellett, who was a crusading newspaper editor in Canton, Ohio.
Mellett was exposing systemic police corruption, bootlegging operations, basically taking on the entire criminal underworld of the city.
And that underworld wasn't interested in a debate. They wanted to silence him.
And they did. Mellett was brutally murdered.
Because of Hill's association with him, Hill gets this anonymous, chilling phone call. And the message is simple. Leave town in 1 hour, or you'll be put in a pine box.
Just imagine that fear. This is Napoleon Hill, the great lecturer on confidence and self-mastery. And he flees. Immediately, he goes into hiding in the mountains of West Virginia.
He describes it as the pain of constant fear. He was always armed, paranoid, looking over his shoulder, checking every car that drove by. His entire life was reduced to just survival, completely dictated by this external threat.
But the physical fear, as bad as that was, it was nothing compared to what came next, right? The mental and spiritual collapse.
That was the real crisis. The sources show that this experience led him to the ultimate humiliation. He realized that he, the author of the philosophy of achievement, was, in his own words, more helpless than any of the 25,000 people whom I had judged as being failures.
Wow. That is a profound moment of reckoning. His entire identity was built on these principles, and when he was truly tested, he couldn't apply them.
He said the experience destroyed whatever initiative I had possessed. He felt this mental bewilderment, this indifference, severe irritability. His own reasoning faculty, he said, had been almost paralyzed.
He was completely trapped by fear and indefiniteness. He was a perfect example of a drifter.
And this paralysis went on for over a year. The turning point, in the fall of 1927, is described in this almost mystical way. He was walking near a school, just lost in his own shame and failure.
And then an idea just bursts into his mind, a clear, distinct, internal command.
The message was totally unambiguous. It said, "This is your testing time. You have been reduced to poverty and humiliated in order that you might be forced to discover your other self."
So the emergency wasn't a curse. It was a crucible. It was a test.
Exactly. The command forced him to see his difficulty not as a personal failure, but as a mandatory exam on his own philosophy. He realized the fear had a purpose. It forced him to hit rock bottom, to stop drifting, and to start thinking in a way he never had before.
And that realization was the pivot. That's when everything changed for him psychologically.
Suddenly, he felt this sense of exultation, his brain cleared, and he made a conscious choice to rise above his circumstances. He paraphrased Henley's Invictus, declaring, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul."
He stopped reacting. He stopped being a victim of external events and started dictating his own purpose.
That internal command was the moment he truly, finally became a non-drifter.
So the awakening of this other self, it wasn't just about a new mindset. It started giving him specific, actionable, and frankly, really illogical commands.
Profoundly illogical. And they were designed to do one thing: solidify his definiteness of purpose and kill the old habit of fear.
The first command was what he called the fool's mission. He was ordered to drive immediately to Philadelphia.
Which, on paper, made zero sense. He was broke. He knew no one in publishing there. And he needed $25,000 to print his 8-volume philosophy.
His logical mind, his reason was telling him he was insane.
But his other self gave these definitive orders, and it demanded absolute obedience. And this is such a crucial point for anyone listening. The journey out of drifting often starts by overriding your own logic with just sheer blind faith in a definite purpose.
The first test was money. He was commanded to ask his brother-in-law for $50. Exactly $50.
And his brother-in-law offered him $100. He said, "50's not enough, take $100. But Hill refused. He only took the $50.
Why? I mean, if he's broke and needs 25 grand, why turn down an extra $50?
Because it wasn't about the money. It was about the discipline. It was about proving to himself that he was adhering strictly to the internal command. Taking 50 when 100 was on the table was a deliberate act of obedience over logic and greed. He was weaning himself off the habit of depending on anything but his other self.
Okay, so the next command was even more radical. I mean, it seems like financial self-sabotage. After the long drive, he has maybe $40 left.
And the command is to register at the most exclusive, most expensive hotel in Philadelphia and ask for a suite of rooms. It would consume almost all his remaining cash.
It's psychological warfare, isn't it? It's a war against that fear entity.
It is. By spending his last dollars on a symbol of abundance and success, that expensive suite, he was deliberately forcing his mind to operate on the level of the wealth he was trying to create, not the poverty he was trying to escape.
He was acting as if. He was forcing himself to think wealthy, even though his reality was, well, the opposite.
That suite became a mental fortress against the fear of poverty. Hill realized his other self was making sure the doors of his mind were slammed shut against any limiting thoughts. The command was basically a promise: act successful, and the resources will show up.
And they did. The manifestation was incredibly fast.
He followed the next instruction, which was to just call names into his mind. And the name Albert L. Pelton, a publisher from Connecticut, just appeared.
He calls him up. Pelton reviews the material and without any hesitation agrees to publish this massive 8-volume philosophy.
And Pelton provided a substantial advance payment, so the money came, just like the other self promised it would when you needed it, but that wasn't the only solution.
Right, there was a second idea that came to him.
The idea to teach a new brand of salesman college graduates who were supposedly untainted by old bad habits how to sell automobiles.
And the retainer he got for that sales training immediately covered all his high living expenses, including that ridiculously expensive hotel suite, until the book royalties started coming in.
He demonstrated in real time the power of definiteness of purpose. The second he stopped drifting and acted with absolute faith, all the necessary resources, both financial and human, just arrived to meet his plan.
So, having finally established this mastery over his own mind, he was ready for the main event of the book. This bizarre, strange interview.
He sets it up like a courtroom. He calls himself Mr. Earthbound, and he forces the devil, or Your Majesty, to confess.
And what's the leverage he has? How can he force the devil to do anything?
The leverage is his total mastery of his own mind and his complete lack of fear. The devil is defined as negative energy, and Hill, by controlling his own thoughts, is the one thing this energy can't touch. He becomes the master interrogator.
And the devil's confession about his own identity is fascinating. It completely depersonalizes evil.
Right. This isn't some guy with horns and a pitchfork. The devil describes himself as negative energy itself. He says he's the negative portion of the atom. He occupies 1/2 of every unit of mental energy and every atom of physical matter. He's a universal law, not a person.
So he exists where we allow him to exist.
Yeah.
He confesses that he lives in the minds of people who fear him, and he specifically occupies the unused space of the human brain.
If you're not actively controlling your mental real estate with a positive, definite purpose, he moves in. It's that simple.
And the result, he claims, is staggering. He says he controls 98 out of every 100 people. He controls all the negative thought, all the apathy, all the fear.
While his opposition, what Hill calls infinite intelligence, controls positive thought and faith, the devil claims to be the cause of all the misery and failure in the world, not because he's so powerful, but because we just willingly give him the space.
And his primary weapon for seizing that mental space is fear. He lays out the 6 most effective fears he uses.
These are the anchors that hold people in place, that keep them drifting. First, the fear of poverty. He says this is the most effective and the most used.
Second is the fear of criticism, which is the very fear that kept this book hidden for so long.
Then the fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love, the fear of old age.
And finally, the fear of death, which he says is the second most used, right after poverty.
It's interesting that poverty and death are the 2 big ones, isn't it? Poverty keeps people so preoccupied with just surviving that they can't think independently, and the fear of death is made worse by religious instructors who plant the fear of eternal punishment.
The devil actually admits he can't punish anyone. The punishment only exists in the person's own mind through the fear of something that doesn't exist, which is just as useful to him as a real threat.
Hill realizes that all forms of fear, no matter where they come from, just extend the mental territory the devil occupies.
And he calls poverty and ill health his greatest allies. Poverty makes people easy prey, and ill health. He says that's often deliberately caused by bad eating habits and neglect. It makes the brain sluggish. It discourages thinking altogether.
Which is his whole goal. The devil needs humans to stop using their minds effectively. This leads to who he considers his greatest enemies. Anyone who inspires independent thought. Socrates, Lincoln, and, Hill himself.
But he also mentions certain wealthy entities. He specifically says he fears the Rockefeller fortune. Why?
Not because of the money. He fears it because it's used to conquer disease and uncover the secrets of nature. It aids human well-being, which promotes independent thought. So fighting disease is, in a way, fighting the devil.
Let's talk about habits. The devil says liquor is good for breaking down independent thought, but was. He claims cigarettes are an even better tool for control. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but his logic is insidious. Liquor tends to be episodic. You get drunk, you recover. Cigarettes, though, they systematically and daily break down the very mental faculties you need for success. Persistence, endurance, and most critically, the ability to concentrate.
So it's not the big explosion, it's the slow, constant drain on your willpower.
Precisely. The devil explains that once a young person is trapped in what he calls the 2-package-a-day club, he has systematically deadened their imaginative faculty. And habits don't live alone, they come in clusters. Breaking down your persistence with cigarettes invites a whole flock of other thought-destroying habits to move in, like liquor or overindulgence in sex. It's a nonstop, daily mental erosion.
Okay, so the 6 fears build the fence around the mind, but the devil needs a continuous action to actually capture that 98%. And this is his masterstroke, the trick he begs Hill not to publish.
He calls its revelation suicide, and that trick is drifting.
Drifting is the psychological act of surrender. Hill forces a very precise definition out of him, doesn't he?
He does. A drifter is one who permits himself to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of his own mind.
That is such a profound statement of personal responsibility. It means the real enemy isn't the external world, it's your passive acceptance of it. If you let your day, your career, your relationships be dictated by the path of least resistance, you are drifting.
And the devil adds the perfect, chilling description. A drifter doesn't know what he wants from life and spends all of his time getting just that.
They successfully achieved nothing.
Wow.
So drifting is basically procrastination.
It's a simple formula. Mental laziness plus indifference equals procrastination, and procrastination equals the habit of drifting.
How does he set this habit up so early in people's lives?
He gains control in childhood. He admits he uses 9 doors to get into the mind: fear, superstition, avarice, greed, lust, revenge, anger, vanity, and just plain laziness. If he can get control while the mind is young and impressionable, he can make sure those doors stay a little bit open forever.
And this is where the confession gets really controversial, because he reveals his most effective agents aren't demons or spirits.
No, his most effective method is using unknowing agents. Parents, school teachers, and religious instructors. He calls this his second best trick, but then immediately corrects himself and says, no, it is first.
So religious instructors, how do they help him?
He explains that they confuse young minds with abstract, unprovable ideas. They actively plant the most persistent fear of all, the fear of hell and eternal punishment. Their instruction makes the mind focus on this terrifying external threat, which distracts the person from ever developing the power of their own mind.
So every sermon against the devil just reinforces his existence and power in people's minds. It fixes the fear.
And the individual becomes so preoccupied with dogma and fear that they lose the ability to think for themselves. Parents are often just as complicit.
How so?
They subdue a child's will, often because they fear the devil themselves, which just passes the fear down. They ensure the child grows up fearing something, which limits their independent thought. He also emphasizes that unearned gifts from parents can be a curse because they discourage self-reliance. They remove the need for the child to think and struggle for what they want.
And then there's Hill's scathing critique of the public school system, which the devil is more than happy to exploit.
The schools, he says, help him by focusing on what to think, not how to think.
They keep children busy cramming their minds with non-essential external information, forcing them to adopt and use the thoughts of others. The whole system is about memorizing facts to get credits, not developing independent reason, imagination, or self-determination.
The devil admits he lives in constant fear that one courageous person will come along and fundamentally reverse the education system.
And how would that reverse system work? What would it look like?
It would make the students the primary instructors, and the teachers would just be guides. It would force children to discover and use their own minds from within, which would eliminate the need to just adopt external thoughts. This one change, the devil confesses, would completely destroy his biggest source of new recruits.
And this habit of drifting, it just seeps into every single adult decision, doesn't it?
Every single one. In health. People drift into bad habits. They overeat the wrong foods, leading to auto-intoxication, which makes the brain sluggish and hostile to any kind of accurate thinking.
In marriage,
Yeah.
people drift into relationships without any definite plan, economic or personal. This leads to constant conflict, bickering, nagging. It's the perfect environment to keep both partners too busy and too irritated to ever break the habit of drifting and focus on a real purpose.
In your occupation, millions of people drift right out of school into the first job they can find. No definite aim, no purpose, which ensures they stay susceptible to the fear of poverty their whole lives.
In savings, they spend freely, save sparingly, living perpetually on the edge of disaster until that fear of poverty just takes complete control.
And maybe the most pervasive of all is drifting through your dominating thoughts. People allow negative thoughts, from the news, from social media, from their friends, to just take root because they're too mentally lazy or indifferent to exercise their own reason and form an original positive thought. They leave the unused space vacant, and the devil moves right in.
So drifting is the trick. But there has to be a mechanism to make it permanent. A drifter has to stay a drifter. This is where he introduces the concept of hypnotic rhythm.
Right, and hypnotic rhythm is described as this force of permanence. It's a universal law of nature, as powerful and inescapable as gravity. It ensures that whatever vibrations you consistently emit, whether they're definite constructive thoughts or indefinite drifting thoughts, will be fixed permanently into your life pattern.
It's like spiritual physics. If you're consistently operating without a purpose, that state of purposelessness becomes like chemically and psychologically permanent in you.
That's a great way to put it. Nature maintains a perfect balance, and this law forces the permanence of your dominating thoughts and your habits. If you sow an acorn, you get an oak. If you sow definite purpose, you get success. If you sow indifference and indecision, you get permanent drifting.
So the law ensures that whatever you sow, you reap. A drifter lets life pay them on its terms. A non-drifter forces life to pay on their own terms. This takes poverty out of the realm of just a socioeconomic condition.
And turns it into a psychological disease. That is Hill's crucial point. Poverty is a disease because nature permanently fixes the thought habits of anyone who accepts poverty as unavoidable. They've entered the hypnotic rhythm of lack, and it takes a massive, definite action to break out of that pattern.
Drifting is the main habit that makes people lose the privilege of shaping their own destiny.
And the devil needs bait to get people into this negative rhythm in the first place. What's the most effective lure he uses to start the whole process?
Flattery.
Flattery. He calls it the chief bait because it targets the most volatile human traits, vanity and egotism.
How does that work specifically? How does a compliment lead to drifting?
He customizes it. For women, he says, it often appeals to vanity, complimenting her beauty, her style, how she wears clothes well. For men, it targets egotism, emphasizing his Herculean body or calling him a great business tycoon.
But the flattery isn't just to be nice, it's strategic.
It's a strategic move. The flattery is used to get the victim to neglect their major purpose. They become satisfied with this temporary, superficial praise, and so they drift away from their long-term, definite aims. It substitutes real achievement with a quick hit of ego validation.
And what if someone's too strong for that? What if they have a purpose? They don't fall for flattery, but they still run into temporary defeat.
Then the devil traps them through misfortune or fear. He hog-ties them while they're down. These unwilling workers are then forced to serve him because they become eternally bound by the deeply fixed habit of drifting that was caused by the trauma. Their failure becomes propaganda to discourage everyone else. Misfortune, Hill realizes, is just the devil's last resort.
But the real power of this manuscript is that Hill forces the devil to reveal his own weaknesses, the antidote to all this control.
Exactly. This confession isn't meant to scare you, it's meant to empower you. And the first step toward freedom is realizing that failure is often a blessing in disguise.
The devil admits this himself. He says failure is actually beneficial because it breaks the grip of hypnotic rhythm. When your plan fails, your old routine is shattered and your mind is temporarily freed for a fresh start.
Failure is a man-made circumstance. It's never real until you accept it as permanent. That's the key distinction. Edison converted every temporary defeat into a stepping stone. A drifter uses failure as an alibi.
Adversity forces you to test your strength, to seek definite ends, and it often triggers the discovery of that other self.
The ultimate counterweapon, the one thing the devil confesses instantly slams the door in his face, is Principle 1, definiteness of purpose.
This is the absolute starting point for any kind of self-determination. If you are definite in your aims and your plans, you can force life to give you whatever you want. It acts like a mental shield.
And Hill elevates this beyond just, setting goals. He says that even a weak plan that's definitely applied will succeed more often than a strong plan that's indefinitely applied.
So why is indefiniteness such a destructive sin?
Because it cuts you off from infinite intelligence, that source of all positive thought and creative ideas. If your mind is muddled and indefinite, that positive energy just can't flow through you. Only the habit of definiteness can prevent all the other destructive habits from taking root.
Okay, next up is Principle 2, self-mastery. This is about controlling the appetites, the sins that cloud your mental clarity and invite drifting.
The first appetite is overeating. It sounds so mundane, but Hill's analysis is sharp. Overeating leads to auto-intoxication. It's a buildup of waste in your body that makes your brain sluggish and irritable, and it prevents accurate thought. He says the brain gets rolled into something resembling a wad of putty.
So mastery just means eating wisely to keep your brain sharp.
The second appetite is overindulgence in sex. This is controversial, but Hill saw sex as our greatest driving creative energy. When it's abused, used without purpose, it depletes your vital magnetic force, it destroys your enthusiasm and persistence, and it's a major gateway to drifting.
But controlled sex, he argues, is a profound virtue.
When it's controlled and transmuted, it provides magnetic force, it sharpens your imagination, and it acts as a powerful antidote for fear and discouragement. Hill claims all great leaders are highly sexed, but they transform that energy into their creative achievements rather than just physical dissipation.
And the third great sin is loosely organized opinions. This isn't just about being talkative, is it?
No, it's the habit of expressing opinions without ever searching for the facts. It creates what he calls the grasshopper mind that just jumps from subject to subject, never finishing anything. It's a subtle form of egotism, believing your unverified opinion is as good as proven fact. It drives away cooperation, and it's a major form of procrastination.
The devil confirms that the ultimate solution to all human problems, the source of all opulence, is accurate thinking. It's the one thing he is absolutely terrified of.
Because it eliminates all his footholds: fear, apathy, and indecision. And the most practical, actionable roadmap Hill gets is the list of required changes for the education system, aimed at eliminating drifting from childhood. For anyone listening who's a learner, this is pure gold.
Okay, let's detail these changes. If the devil controls the current system, what specific reversals are needed?
First, you have to reverse the learning methodology. Children must be given the privilege of self-discovery instead of being force-fed facts. The teacher becomes a guide, forcing the child to use their own mind.
Second, they have to teach the true nature of sex and proper eating habits.
Yeah.
Health, both mental and physical, has to be paramount.
Third, they have to be taught the actual mechanics of their own minds. How habits become fixed through hypnotic rhythm. If a child understands that law of permanence, they're far less likely to drift into negative habits.
Fourth, they have to teach the value of harmony, self-control, and the law of increasing returns, always doing more or better service than expected. And finally, the foundational truth. The only real limitations are self-imposed.
This moves education from just memorizing history to actually mastering your own destiny. And beyond education, Hill outlines other crucial principles, like Principle 4, controlling your environment.
Your associations.
This requires extreme, deliberate caution. Hill warns that your environmental influences are your destiny. You have to select your associates with care because they will determine whether you drift or stay definite. Successful people create a mastermind alliance, a carefully chosen group of positive minds to support their aims.
And finally, Principle 7, caution. Next to drifting itself, Hill says a lack of caution is the most dangerous trait.
The non-drifter is a planner. They plan ahead, they allow for human frailties, they meticulously select their associates based on whether they bring a definite mental, spiritual, or economic benefit. The drifter just acts first and thinks later, trusting to luck. The non-drifter trusts planning and definiteness.
Hill's final reflection after this whole interview is over is maybe the most profound part of the book.
It really is. He realizes he had been carrying the matches that lit his own fires of adversity, the fear, the indecision, and the water to put them out. His own power of thought and definiteness was at his command the whole time.
His entire journey, the years of instability, the terror in Canton, it all served one purpose: to force him to actually apply the principles he'd been preaching. His failures were only offset by the absolute certainty of his major purpose.
It proved that victory belongs to those who know exactly what they want and are absolutely determined to have it no matter what temporary setbacks come their way.
So the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive into Outwitting the Devil is this stark realization that the devil, this negative force of apathy and fear, is only real because we give him the mental space to be real. The choice between drifting and non-drifting is always yours.
Drifting is just following the path of least resistance, which leads you directly into the grip of hypnotic rhythm, where all those negative habits become permanent.
Non-drifting is exercising the power of your own thought, backed by that absolute definiteness of purpose, and forcing life to yield to your terms.
And if you look back at the controversy, the very fact that this roadmap to mental freedom was written in 1938 and then hidden until 2011, possibly because Hill's own wife feared criticism, well, it just underscores the devil's deepest fear.
He confessed it, didn't he?
He did. He said, "If you publish this confession, it would be sufficient to keep me from gaining control of the yet unborn and those who have not yet reached the age of reason." The delay in publishing, imposed by fear, denied an entire generation access to this truth.
It raises a pretty provocative final question then. What crucial knowledge, what truth capable of breaking the grip of fear and drifting are we allowing the pressure of criticism or controversy to suppress today?
Thank you for watching. Please like and share, subscribe, follow up in next topic.
We hope you feel equipped now to go out there and claim that 2% space of mental mastery and to finally discover your other self.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are moving into some truly essential territory today, and I am personally so excited to come back to continue Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill.
I am too. It's just an astonishing text.
It really is. And if you've been with us on this journey, you know this isn't just self-help. This is, well, it's a confrontation with the forces that Hill says hold back 98% of humanity.
It's revolutionary, frankly. We're digging into a manuscript that Hill wrote back in 1938, so this is right after the massive success of Think and Grow Rich.
Right on the heels of it.
Exactly. But then this work, it was intentionally suppressed, hidden away for more than 70 years.
And that suppression is such a key part of the story, isn't it? It didn't actually see the light of day until 2011. What was the reason for that really extreme fear of publishing it?
Well, the fear was very specific. It all centered on this intense critique of organized religion, of our societal institutions that Hill delivers. And he does it using the devil as his direct conversational partner.
Which is a bold move, to say the least.
A very bold move. At the time, Hill's wife, Annie Lou, was the secretary to the president of a prominent Presbyterian college, a man named Dr. William Plumer Jacobs. And she was absolutely terrified.
Terrified of what, specifically?
That publishing an interview with the devil, especially a devil who claims our institutions are his unwitting allies, would get Hill instantly fired. That there would be this huge public backlash, and it would just destroy his career.
So the fear of criticism, which, and this is the irony Hill explicitly calls out as one of the devil's primary weapons, is what kept his greatest work locked down.
That's the perfect irony. It's exactly that. So Annie Lou suppressed it until her death in 1984.
Wow.
Then the manuscript passed to Hill's nephew, Dr. Charlie Johnson, and his wife, Frankie. And they had the exact same concerns, the same fear of public reaction.
So it stayed hidden.
It did. It was only published a few years after Frankie's passing.
Yeah.
And that's what finally freed this really explosive blueprint for self-mastery.
So that's our mission for this deep dive then, right? To decode this interview Hill claims to have had with the devil, or as he calls him, Mr. Earthbound's antagonist.
Yes, to really understand the mechanics of fear, of mental control, and then get into the 7 principles of self-determination that he lays out.
And Hill makes it clear his goal wasn't just intellectual. He wanted to share what he called the stupendous fortune that came with discovering his other self. Before we get into strategy, though, let's nail down what this devil actually is.
Right, because it's not the traditional guy with a pitchfork.
No.
Hill's devil is a metaphysical force. It's a presence. Hill establishes that the devil is simply negative energy. And get this, the devil claims to occupy 1/2 of every single atom of physical matter and every unit of mental energy.
1/2 of every atom.
He is the negative portion of the atom itself. His kingdom is where fear lives, specifically in the minds of people who let themselves be governed by fear, by ignorance, by superstition.
That immediately makes the problem feel so much bigger. It's systemic, not personal. It's literally embedded in reality.
Precisely. And the shocking figure is his success rate. He claims to control 98 out of every 100 people.
98%.
98%. And he does it by occupying the unused space of the human brain. The 2% who escape, he calls them non-drifters, the definite thinkers.
So it's a 2% survival rate in this mental battle. And if he occupies the unused space, that suggests the whole fight for freedom is just the constant effort of filling your own mind with intentional, positive thought.
That is the core thesis of the entire book. And before we get into the 7 principles of freedom, we have to understand the mechanism that locks all this negativity into place. Hill calls it hypnotic rhythm.
Hypnotic rhythm. Okay.
It's a natural law. It's what fixes our repetitive thought patterns into permanent automatic habits. So if you think negative thoughts over and over, hypnotic rhythm just ensures that negativity becomes your default behavior.
But it works the other way, too.
It does. If you think definitely, that also becomes fixed. It's the great engine of habit formation, and the devil, well, he uses it against us.
Okay, so let's unpack his arsenal. If the devil's job is to occupy that unused space in our minds, he needs a way to sow the seeds of negativity. What did he say was his cleverest device for mind control?
Fear. Plain and simple. He details the 6 most effective fears: the fear of poverty, of criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, and of course death. These 6 are universal. They affect every single human mind to some degree.
But he honed in on 2 of them, didn't he? He identified 2 as his most useful, his sort of heavy artillery.
Yes. Poverty and death. He called poverty his greatest weapon. And the logic behind it is just chillingly efficient.
How so?
He says poverty deliberately discourages people from accumulating wealth, but more importantly, it discourages them from thinking independently. I mean, if you're consumed by the struggle for mere survival, you just don't have any mental energy left for higher thought.
You're just reacting.
You're just reacting. You become easy prey, focused only on what you lack.
So material wealth, then, isn't just about comfort. It's a defense mechanism against this primary weapon because it frees up your cognitive bandwidth.
Exactly. It's the difference between reacting to your circumstances, which is what he calls drifting, and strategically planning your life, which is definite thinking.
And the other one, the fear of death.
He says that one is used deftly by his unwitting allies in religion. They make people believe some fiery monster is waiting at the gate for eternal punishment.
Yeah, but wait, I have to ask again. If he's just negative energy, how can he actually administer punishment?
That's the trick. He admits he can't. He can't punish anyone physically or externally. His power is entirely internal.
So it's all in our heads.
All in our heads. He punishes only in that person's own mind through some form of fear. The fear of the devil is a completely self-inflicted wound. All these fears just extend the space he occupies in the mind, and that allows hypnotic rhythm to cement the anxiety into a permanent habit.
Okay, let's look at the operational side of this. Beyond fear, what are the specific allies or weaknesses he exploits to get that traction?
Well, his allies include ill health. A body that's unhealthy and sluggish makes accurate thinking almost impossible. And then he has countless human agents. People in every calling, race, and creed. Teachers, parents, even religious figures who, either through their own fear or just their lack of definiteness, spread the seeds of fear and mental laziness.
And this brings us to that really remarkable point Hill makes about wealth and philanthropy. The devil names a figure we usually associate with, immense wealth, John D. Rockefeller, as his worst enemy.
This is such a crucial insight into Hill's thinking. The devil claims the Rockefeller fortune is one of his worst enemies because it's being used strategically to isolate and conquer diseases of the physical body worldwide.
So because fear of ill health is one of the big ones.
It's second only to the fear of poverty. So fighting disease, improving sanitation, wiping out slums, all of this directly reduces the physical and mental stress that makes people susceptible to his influence.
So it's an intellectual argument. Philanthropy, when it's aimed at getting rid of fear sources like poverty and illness, is basically an act of war against psychological weakness.
That's it, exactly. It reframes the whole purpose of wealth. It's not just accumulation, it's creating an environment where independent thought can actually flourish.
Speaking of destruction, Hill seemed really shocked when the devil claimed that among destructive habits, cigarettes are a greater tool than liquor.
Yeah, it sounds absurd at first, right? Until you hear the calculated logic. The devil is targeting persistence. That's the fuel for definiteness of purpose.
And cigarettes attack that directly.
He claims they break down persistence, endurance, and destroy the ability to concentrate for any sustained period. And the reason it's worse than liquor is because habits rarely travel alone. They come in pairs, triplets, and quadruplets.
A gateway habit.
A perfect gateway habit. Cigarette smoking weakens your willpower, that mental resistance, and it invites a whole flock of other thought-destroying habits. Liquor, overindulgence in sex, and, most importantly, mental laziness. It paves the way for the master trick.
Which is drifting?
Drifting. It's the main habit he uses to silently enter our minds and secure that 98% control. A drifter, as Hill defines it, is someone who just permits themselves to be influenced and controlled by whatever is happening around them.
They're mentally lazy.
Mentally lazy, pack of least resistance. The drifter doesn't know what they want from life, and as a result, they spend their whole life getting exactly that. Nothing definite.
And their opinions. They're all borrowed, right? They don't generate their own conclusions.
Precisely. The devil supplies their opinions, and because the drifter is lazy, they just adopt them wholesale. And this control starts incredibly young, sometimes before birth, through the parents' own minds. Hill identifies 9 useful weaknesses he uses to get the door open. Things like fear, superstition, greed, lust, anger, vanity, and just plain laziness.
And once he's in, hypnotic rhythm takes over and cements the habit.
That's the process. And he doesn't just stop at individuals. He explicitly takes credit for instigating major global catastrophes.
Right. This is where the 1938 context is so critical.
He claims credit for both world wars and the Great Depression, all by sowing seeds of mass fear. He says propagandists are his key agents. They prepare minds to drift through manipulation. Hill even records the devil saying his agents were preparing Americans to become Hitlerized by sowing fear and strife between employers and employees.
Keeping the populace distracted and emotional.
Exactly. Mass fear is his favorite, most efficient tool.
Okay, let's make this actionable for you listening. What is the drifter profile? What are the specific red flags that would indicate someone has fallen into that 98%?
Well, the profile is basically a checklist of mental inaction. The drifter lacks enthusiasm, lacks initiative. They're often ill-tempered, no control over their emotions. They make the same mistakes over and over again.
And they criticize success.
They do, often because they envy it. They avoid making firm decisions, preferring to wait for things to just happen to them. Physically, they eat too much, exercise too little, which goes right back to that sluggish mind. The devil sums it up perfectly. The drifter will work harder to avoid thinking than most others work to earn a good living.
That is profound. The hardest work for a drifter is the work of governing themselves. So how does the 2% differ? What's the non-drifter profile?
The non-drifter has a definite, well-organized plan for a major goal, with specific, smaller goals leading up to it. They're known for quick steps, direct answers. It all reflects the efficiency of their mind.
And they're go-givers.
Yes, Not just go-getters. They extend cooperation, but they accept it sparingly because they prefer to rely on themselves. But the major distinguishing feature is so simple, yet so powerful. He has a mind of his own and uses it for all purposes.
So, if drifting is the lock and hypnotic rhythm is the cement, then the 7 principles are the master key. The way to break that hold. Let's start with the cornerstone, the one without which nothing else works. Principle 1, definiteness of purpose. DOP.
DOP is the only known anti-venom to the devil's primary weapon. Hill states that any human being who is definite in their aims and plans can make life hand over what they want. It has to be adopted as a guiding policy in all affairs of life.
Not just your career.
No, everything. Health, relationships, finances. It's the habit of setting your own mental boundaries and insisting that circumstances conform to your design instead of the other way around.
And Hill gives a pretty radical prescription here. He favors action over perfection.
Yes, and this is where it gets really practical. He argues that a weak plan definitely applied is superior to a sound, strong plan that's indefinitely applied.
Why is that?
Because definiteness itself creates momentum. It forces the mind to stop drifting. The person who is definite, even if they're occasionally wrong, learns fast and adjusts. The person with the perfect plan who does nothing is just drifting.
Always be definite, even if you're not always right.
That's the message. That definiteness alone breaks the hypnotic rhythm of indecision.
This brings us to one of the most provocative claims in the book. The devil weighs in on love, and he calls it a powerful bait.
That's a really tough concept to swallow.
It is, and it demands careful nuance. Hill isn't criticizing affection or healthy relationships. He's criticizing the irrational loss of definiteness that happens when you make another person's approval the sole purpose of your life.
When it overrides your own major purpose.
Exactly. The devil claims love for anyone or anything except DOP itself is risky because it beclouds reason, saps willpower, and blinds you to facts. If he knows what you love most, he knows exactly how to lure you into drifting by threatening it. It has to be kept under definite control. It sounds like he's advocating for a kind of radical self-reliance, almost to the point of being cold. What about our duty to family, to children?
The devil argues your first duty is to yourself, to find a full and happy life built on your own definiteness of purpose. Only after you've mastered your own life can you really assume responsibility for helping others.
And he says too much help can actually be a curse.
A huge curse, especially for children. Parents often spoil kids by indulging them instead of forcing them to seek knowledge and self-determination for themselves. He says necessity is the greatest teacher. Giving a child too much comfort just ensures they'll grow up without the habit of definite thought and planning.
And how does all this align with something like prayer?
He strips prayer of all begging and whining. Prayer is only effective, Hill claims, when it's a definite purpose backed by faith and definite action. People who beg God to solve their problems are, in his view, just too lazy to create what they want with their own minds.
Self-reliance is the ultimate law.
As the devil says. Infinite intelligence favors only those who understand and adapt themselves to her laws.
That's a perfect transition to the second principle, which is the engine that maintains DOP's self-discipline.
Self-discipline is mastering yourself so you can maintain those positive thought habits. It's how you prevent your mind from becoming that unused space. Hill identifies 3 natural appetites that, if you let them run wild, lead you straight to drifting.
Okay, what are they?
Food, sex, and opinions.
Let's start with food. It's the most basic, but probably the one we all abuse the most.
Hill links physical health directly to mental definiteness. He says most people overindulge in rich foods that clog the system, leading to what he called auto-intoxication, body sewer poisoning.
Doesn't sound pleasant.
It's not. It clogs the body's elimination system, and that forces vital energy away from the brain. It makes your brain machinery like a wad of putty. It destroys your power for accurate, sustained thought. So mastering your appetite for food is the foundational step to mastering your mind.
Makes perfect sense. A lethargic body means a drifting mind. Okay, moving to the second appetite, the huge topic of sex transmutation.
This is a dense concept, and it's often misunderstood, but it's central to Hill's philosophy. Sex is one of the greatest driving forces in humanity. It's this immense power. And because of that, it has to be understood, mastered, and consciously transmuted.
Transmuted into what?
Into constructive, creative activity. Primarily into your major purpose, your work.
And how does the devil exploit this energy if it's not controlled?
Through overindulgence. The devil notes that using sex purely for physical gratification without transmuting it depletes your magnetic energy, your charisma, your mental drive. It removes the sparkle from one's eyes and destroys persistence. He says it has the same effect as narcotics.
So all great leaders
Are highly sexed, according to Hill. But they control and direct that energy behind their occupation. They channel it into their work, which exponentially increases their mental capacity and their charisma.
So it's not about repression, it's about redirection, using one of our strongest energies as fuel for DOP.
Precisely, converting intense desire into productive thought.
Okay, now the third appetite. And this one feels like it was written this morning. The appetite for expressing loosely organized opinions.
This habit creates what Hill calls a grasshopper mind. It just jumps from one thought to another, but never commits to anything, never completes anything. Wise people, he says, keep their definite plans to themselves.
Why is that?
To prevent others from interfering or, stealing their ideas prematurely, the habit of constantly spouting uninvited opinions is really just an expression of vanity and egotism, a desperate need for attention.
And with social media, this feels incredibly relevant.
Oh, absolutely. Hill's example was people writing uninvited letters to prominent figures, which made them easy victims for con men. But in the modern context, the constant, unsolicited expression of opinions on every subject imaginable, it creates a profound vulnerability.
You're telling the world your plans before they're ready.
And you're opening yourself up to criticism. But worst of all, you're replacing the hard work of self-discipline and research with mental laziness. You're just drifting on fundamental issues. A disciplined mind keeps quiet until it has a definite, actionable plan.
Okay, we've established the shield and the sword, DOP and self-discipline, but even the most disciplined person faces setbacks. We see failure as a roadblock, a punishment. Hill argues it's the very thing that breaks the devil's hold.
He's very clear on this. He says failure is man-made. It's purely a state of mind. It's never real until you accept it as permanent. Nature doesn't force people to fail. We just accept a negative circumstance, a loss, a setback as a permanent failure, and then hypnotic rhythm immediately cements that defeat into a habit of negativity.
So adversity, the thing we all try to avoid, is actually a blessing in disguise. How does it serve us?
It's the ultimate shock treatment. Adversity breaks the grip of a negative hypnotic rhythm. It violently frees the mind for a fresh start. It forces you to test your mental, your physical, your spiritual strength. It brings you face to face with your own weaknesses.
Which you have to see before you can improve.
Exactly. Failure is just the dead end of a particular habit path. It forces you to change course and create a new, positive rhythm.
And this relates directly to material loss, doesn't it? Which, for many of us, is the deepest kind of failure we feel.
The loss of material things, money, assets, status, teaches the most valuable lesson of all. And that is that man has control over nothing and has no assurance of the permanent use of anything except his own power of thought. Once that material reliance is stripped away, you're forced to depend on your own mind.
And that leads you toward the other self.
It's a powerful paradox. We avoid failure at all costs, but Hill says success is usually born directly from defeat.
He says it's but one short step beyond the point where one quits fighting.
Right. And when you study the lives of successful people, like Thomas Edison, you find their success is in exact ratio to the defeats they surmounted. Edison converted every single failure, all the thousands of times the light bulb didn't work, into a stepping stone.
So failure is a blessing only if it forces you to stop drifting.
And acquire new knowledge, build new habits, and get back on the path toward your major purpose. If you quit, the rhythm of defeat just takes over.
And Hill takes this even further. He argues that nature itself uses adversity as a kind of corrective action, not as a punishment, but as a reset button.
Yes, nature uses these massive forces to break established negative rhythms. Illness breaks the physical rhythm of the body. Economic depressions break the rhythm of mass thought when huge numbers of people become greedy or fearful.
He was writing right after the 1929 crash.
He was, and he describes the depression as the equivalent reprimand for the war, a necessary correction that planted the seed of an equivalent advantage. Failure for an individual just breaks the rhythm of negative thought and forces them to establish new habits. It's painful, but it's necessary for evolution.
We've covered the internal battle purpose, discipline, adversity. Now let's look at how the definite thinker aligns with external forces, with natural law, starting with Principle 4, controlling environmental influence, especially our associations.
This is really the external side of hypnotic rhythm. The law forces every individual to form thought habits that harmonize with their environment, particularly with the other minds in that environment.
So if you're surrounded by negativity and laziness,
Hypnotic rhythm will force your thought habits to become negative and lazy. There's no escaping it.
which means success absolutely requires controlling your environment, controlling who you let close to you.
That's right. The most successful people use the mastermind principle, the coordination of two or more minds toward a definite end. They surround themselves only with people who bring some definite mental, spiritual, or economic benefit.
This makes choosing a spouse or an intimate partner maybe the most critical decision a non-drifter can make.
It's the ultimate test of definiteness. A spouse has tremendous influence because that relationship brings your minds under the strongest possible form of hypnotic rhythm. If those two minds don't harmonize, if one is a drifter and one is definite, that relationship creates constant friction.
And the definite thinker gets dragged back into drifting.
Inevitably. You have to select your intimate associates with the same care you choose the food for your body. The goal is always to associate with people whose dominating thoughts are positive, friendly, and harmonious.
Okay, moving on to principle 5, time. Hill calls this our greatest asset, the one thing we own outright, besides our thought power.
Yes, and it has to be budgeted, of course. But Hill also talks about time metaphysically. He says time is nature's seasoning influence, through which our experience can ripen into wisdom.
And wisdom, he insists, is not the same thing as just accumulating knowledge.
Not at all. We're taught to just gather facts, but Hill says that's often a distraction. Knowledge is just the facts. Wisdom is the ability to relate yourself to nature's laws to make them serve you, and to relate to other people to gain their harmonious cooperation.
He says knowledge without wisdom is dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. He points to science's achievements being converted into implements of destruction because the scientists lacked the wisdom to understand the ultimate consequences. Wisdom only comes through the lapse of time, usually after age 40 for most people, and through voluntary effort reflecting on your experience. You have to think your way into wisdom.
Principle 6 is harmony, which we kind of touched on with the mastermind. How does this work as a principle of natural law?
Well, harmony just means that nature relates everything of a similar nature. Positive associates with positive, negative with negative. Nature abhors a vacuum, and it abhors idleness. If your brain isn't used for positive, creative thoughts, nature fills that vacuum with negative thoughts.
So success demands internal harmony, which then attracts harmonious, successful external circumstances.
That's it. Successful leaders like Henry Ford insisted on harmony among their associates, and they moved with definiteness of purpose. Ford formed the habit of not drifting on any subject. Hill argues that understanding and applying this principle is the major difference between a Henry Ford and a day laborer.
Okay, finally, principle 7, caution. The devil claims a lack of this is the second greatest danger, right after drifting.
The drifter always moves without caution. They act first, usually emotionally, and think later, if at all. They just let people and circumstances attach themselves to them. Caution is the mental break that allows the definite thinker to analyze a situation before committing.
So how is this different from just being indecisive?
Indecision is drifting. Caution is deliberate analysis. Caution should be used primarily in the selection of your associates and in your method of relating to them. The non-drifter is careful. They allow no one to be close to them unless that person contributes some definite benefit that aligns with their purpose.
It's not selfish, it's essential.
It's essential for mental clarity and self-determination. The definite thinker is cautious about when and how they move, making sure every action aligns with their major purpose.
With those 7 principles in place, we can really understand why Hill thought this book was so dangerous. He uses the devil as his mouthpiece to deliver this scathing critique of the very institutions designed to uplift us. He claims education and organized religion are the devil's unwitting allies.
This is the absolute heart of the controversy that kept the book suppressed for so long. The devil gloats that both institutions are beneficial to him because they manage the minds of the masses through fear and conditioning, which prevents the development of DOP.
Let's start with the critique of religion. It was fear of this section that terrified Annie Lou, right?
Yes, the devil claims that religious instructors inadvertently help him by frightening children with the fear of hell and eternal damnation. This kindles a flame of fear in a young mind that destroys their power to think accurately. It replaces logic with superstition.
As long as people fear something, he's got a grip on them.
A firm grip. Hill's contention is that the only salvation we really need is salvation from ignorance and fear. And that comes from recognizing the power of your own mind. For Hill, true spirituality is self-mastery, not blind faith.
And now the public schools. The failure here, he argues, is the failure to produce definite thinkers.
The major weakness, which is still so pertinent today, is the system's focus on memorizing facts and accumulating credits. It's not about teaching definiteness of purpose, or, more critically, teaching students how to use their own minds.
They're taught to adopt the thoughts of others.
Exactly, without questioning the application of that knowledge to their own life's purpose. So the system turns out graduates whose minds are empty of self-determination and just filled with unapplied knowledge. They're ripe for drifting.
The idea that students are graded on their ability to adopt others' thoughts rather than challenge them, that directly feeds the devil's agenda.
It's a perfect system for them. If you're taught from age 6 to accept external authority without question, you never develop the mental muscles you need to set an internal, definite policy for your own life. You're conditioned to drift and wait for instructions.
This is why the most shocking twist in the whole interview is when Hill forces the devil to provide the ideal curriculum, the very subjects that would counter drifting.
It's the ultimate ironic roadmap. The devil reluctantly outlines a curriculum that would deal his cause a death blow, because it's focused entirely on self-mastery and DOP.
Let's go through this curriculum. It was revolutionary for 1938, and it's still revolutionary today. First, reversing the system of instruction.
The devil proposes that students should be the instructors and teachers should be guides. This forces the student to take responsibility for understanding and applying the material. It encourages active, definite thought.
And second, a focus on the true assets, time and self-maintenance.
Yes, teach students how to budget and use time, recognizing it's their greatest asset. Teach them proper eating mastery over the body and the true nature of sex, and how that energy can be transmuted into a driving force for achievement.
Third, a direct confrontation with the habit of drifting.
Teach children to be definite in all things, starting with choosing a major purpose in life. Teach them how habits become fixed through hypnotic rhythm, so they consciously adopt positive habits early on.
And finally, teaching them to trust their highest self and natural law.
Teach them to face facts, not run from them, to use adversity as a tool. Encourage their sixth sense, that ability to receive ideas from unknown sources, and teach them the law of compensation, that everything you do for another, you also do to and for yourself.
And wrapping it all up is the ultimate empowering lesson, the antidote to fear.
Teach children that their only real limitations are those they set up in their own minds, and that man can achieve whatever man can conceive and believe. By teaching them that, you make the devil's fear-based control completely obsolete.
It's just a powerful irony that the system Hill suggested in 1938, teaching kids how to budget their time, manage their appetites, find a purpose, is exactly what modern education is still criticized for neglecting.
That gap is the devil's greatest victory in our era. Hill concluded the quickest way to force these ideas into public schools was to first introduce them through private schools and successful entrepreneurs, creating a demand that the public schools would have to follow.
Okay, so bringing this entire deep dive together, Hill's final analysis gives us a concise formula for human failure. He concludes that most of our difficulties are the climax of a destructive trio: the habit of drifting, amplified by the law of hypnotic rhythm, and fixed by time.
That trio is the chain that binds the 98%. Drifting is the action. Hypnotic rhythm is the law that makes it automatic. And time is what makes that destructive habit permanent.
To illustrate how quickly that definite path can be lost, you pointed to a powerful political example from the 1930s, Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Yes. Hill uses FDR as a perfect example of DOP in mass action. Roosevelt skyrocketed to great power in his first term because he had a definite purpose: to stop the stampede of fear from the Depression and restore faith. There was no ambiguity. The nation was hungry for it and got behind him.
But then he lost that momentum. He abandoned his definiteness.
Exactly. By the end of his first term, Roosevelt changed his policy. He became indefinite. He started drifting on critical issues, especially between employers and employees. And this change split his support. Hill argues that Roosevelt belly-flopped to the starting point because he let the habit of drifting take root.
It shows that even immense power can be dismantled by a failure to stick to that first principle.
The central truth, therefore, is clear. Mental victory is the only victory that matters. Victory goes to those who know what they want and are determined to have it. They have definite plans, policies, and objectives. Their opposition, which might greatly outnumber them, has no chance because the opposition is just drifting along, hoping for something to turn up.
And all of this work, the self-discipline, harnessing the appetites, embracing adversity, it's all designed to lead us back to that core message Hill wanted to share: the discovery of the other self.
The other self, or the higher self, is the self that knows no limitations, has no fears, and recognizes no such word as impossible. It's the spiritual and mental power of thought itself, uncorrupted by fear, and it's available to everyone.
Provided they're not steeped in greed.
Right, or focused only on material things. And this self is typically only revealed under duress.
In an emergency.
Exactly, in times of unusual emergency or adversity, when we're forced to stop drifting and think our way out of a problem. The 7 principles are just the process of voluntarily inducing that state of emergency, compelling the other self to step forward without waiting for a crisis.
It's really stunning to think this entire handbook for self-determination was hidden for so long because of the very fear of criticism Hill warns against. It suggests the devil succeeded, at least temporarily.
That temporary suppression is the ultimate proof that the devil's tactics work. But now that the manuscript is out there, it's the ultimate guide for overcoming the turmoil and uncertainty we face today. The challenge for you, for everyone listening, is to recognize that this negative energy is real, and the only defense is the consistent, definite application of these 7 principles, starting with your own major purpose.
Hill summed up his own journey by reflecting on the source of his misery and his salvation. He said, "I find now, at the end of my interview with the devil, that I had been carrying in my own pockets the matches with which the fires of adversity were being touched off.
And I find, too, that the water with which those fires were finally extinguished was at my command in great abundance."
That power, the power of definite thought, is available to you right now. Use the water, find your purpose, and refuse the great temptation to drift. We appreciate you joining us for this deep dive today. If you found this discussion valuable, please like, share, subscribe, and join us for the next video. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, follow up in next video.